All right, let's talk about the differences between the XP Deus and the XP ORX when it comes to gold hunting. So, first off, on the XP Deus, you've got one program. It's the Goldfield program. On the XP ORX, you've got two programs. One is gold. The second one is fine gold. Now, the difference between fine gold and gold on the XP or X is just a matter of setup. Internally, it's all the same, but what you've got is on gold, you've got a reactivity of 2. On fine gold, it's 2.5. The sensitivity on gold is at 95. The sensitivity on fine gold is 90, yeah. And then the frequency is different too. So it looks like, and I'm not 100% sure on this, but it looks like what's happening is if you start out in 14 kilohertz on gold 1 and then you switch to fine gold, it jumps the kilohertz up, up a notch. So if you started out on 32 kilohertz on gold 1 and then you went over to gold 2 or fine gold, then it would jump up to your higher frequency depending on the coil that you've got. So those are kind of the differences I see in the two programs. But then as far as the program setup on the Deus and the XP ORX goes, if we go into menu, first thing that comes up is sensitivity. Those are exactly the same on both of them. On the next one down, we've got frequency, and that's going to depend on the coil that you're using. So I would suggest using the high frequency coils for gold hunting, and in that case you're going to have a frequency range between 14 and 54 kilohertz on the 9-inch round and 14 and 80 kilohertz on the elliptical coil. So if we go down one more, we've got reactivity. On the ORX, we've got adjustments between 1 and 3. And on the Deus, we've got adjustments between 1 and 5, so that is a difference there. If we go down one more here, on both of them we have disc, which is iron amplitude rejection, I believe. I never can remember exactly what that stands for, but anyway, in that setting, we've got between 1 and 5. Now, 1 is a setting of 0 is off. There's no disc at all. 1 is going to be your shallow targets, and as you progress up to 5, it'd go progressively deeper on iron rejection. So you can use that if you get into an area that's got a lot of tin cans or bottle caps or nails or whatever, and that'll save you from digging some shallow targets. A lot of times you can tell them just because they're so loud, but it can get annoying, so it is good to have that option. If we go down one more, on the Deus we have threshold. On the ORX we have iron volume on or off. Let's see, let's turn it on, or I mean off. So we got on and off. Now in order to use that feature, you do have to have the IAR set at least 1, and when you do, iron will give an iron tone, and then your good targets will give a good high pitch tone when you go over them. So if we go down one more and get caught up on the ORX, we've got threshold. Threshold adjustment is 0 to, I believe, 9. Actually, it's a lot higher. You can do all the way to 20. So that's going to be a matter of preference. It does help when you get into areas where you've got some deeper nuggets. You might just hear simply a threshold change, rather than an actual signal on a deeper target. So that is kind of nice to have that. If we go down one more, we've got back to sensitivity on the ORX. But on the Deus, we've got one called audio response. So a lower setting is going to be your deeper targets will sound deeper, the tone or the modulation in the audio is going to be softer. The higher you go, the less modulated the audio will be. So if you went all the way up to 7, it's going to, all your targets are going to sound the same, whether they're deep or shallow. So that is the difference there. I normally would run that at 2, maybe 3. And then the ORX is just set. I'm not sure exactly what it's set like. So those are the main differences between the two there on the program. Okay, ground balance on, let's talk about ground balance on both of these. Ground balance on the Deus. Now, if you want to do an automatic ground balance when you're in the Goldfield program, you would push and hold this button here and pump the coil, and your ground balance numbers would, your ground would read up here, your ground balance setting would read down here, and you could see them level out. The other choices that you got for ground balance is manual ground balance, where you go in and just manually, if you remember what your ground number was on the previous screen, you can go in here and manually adjust it. Pumping is going to be basically what I just said, where you pump the coil up and down. You would push the start button. It would show an image of the coil being pumped up and down, and you would do that to get the ground balance number evened out. Beach, we're not going to cover. I mean, if you were in a salt area, like a dry lake bed that had salt in it, and you had gold that was in that area, you could use the beach program. But for general purpose gold hunting, you're probably not going to get into that. Tracking, if you wanted to select tracking, obviously you would just put it on tracking and then go back. I personally don't like tracking because it has a tendency to track out small or deep nuggets. I don't like tracking generally on any metal detector, but if you got into a case where the ground was just changing so much that you had to ground balance just repeatedly, every couple of feet, then it would be worth using tracking. You just have to be careful. You wouldn't want to go over nuggets a bunch of times, especially if they were deep, because it does have the tendency to make those disappear. So let's talk briefly about what we got for ground balance on the ORX. Okay, ground balance on the ORX. To do automatic ground balance, you would simply push the pinpoint button here and pump the coil up and down, and then your ground's going to even out. If you want to do a manual ground balance, you can do that by just pushing the up or down, or the plus or minus signs. You'll see that the ground changes. There's little dots along the side here, so you've got, within the 86 range, you've got like 3 dots that are micro movements as far as ground goes. So you can, if you see what your ground is, you can manually adjust it to match it. I personally would just rather push the automatic button and just go that way, pump the coil a couple of times, and you're good to go. If you get into an area where you need to use the salt feature, what you do is just press and hold this for a couple seconds, and it'll enter the salt ground balance mode. Turn it off, do the same thing. Like I said, as with the Deus, you probably aren't going to have to use that, unless you get into an area that's like a dry lake bed and you've got a lot of alkaline and stuff like that. The problem is that when you get into an area like that, generally your small gold nuggets are going to read in the salt range, and you're going to eliminate them. They're going to be really hard to find. So anyway, those are the differences between the ORX and the Deus on ground balance. And so let's just do a quick wrap up here, and I'll tell you what my feelings are on a comparison between the two. Okay, in regards to the ORX versus the Deus, when it comes to gold nugget hunting, there really isn't a lot of difference between the two of them. And honestly, I think both of them would probably do you about as good when it comes to gold nugget hunting. Now the one advantage that the Deus does have over the ORX, like we discussed, is the ability to have a higher reactivity setting, and that's going to help you in mineralized ground. If you get really severely mineralized ground, you could set your reactivity higher and possibly get a little bit better performance out of it. But I mean, normally 3, which is available on both machines, is going to be sufficient enough. So it all comes down to whether or not you want a machine that is easier to set up versus one that might be a little bit more difficult to set up, or just has more settings that you can make on it. If you're into easy use, I would say get the ORX. You've got a Gold 1 program and a Gold 2 program. You can just switch between the two of them depending on the area that you're in. If you want a little bit more adjustability, and then there's the Deus. Regardless, either one of them is going to do going to do fine out in the field. And the one thing that is nice about it is they've got adjustable frequencies. You've actually got multiple detectors in one. You're not stuck in one frequency, where the higher frequencies are good for small gold nuggets, and the lower frequencies are better for bigger gold nuggets or deeper gold nuggets. So that's my take on the two. Like I say, either way, I think you'll be happy with either one you choose. So good luck out in the field. Thanks for watching.